Hey gamers, and welcome back to another episode of Future Sight, which is of course a soundproof podcast production. Jake is back with me in his studio again for another episode here. Of course, I'm Brendan, and I'm joined by Jake as per usual. You can find us at Mr. BDog46 or at Major Bowman. And we're back with another Regulation C match that occurred at the very last event that took place, which was, of course, EUIC this past weekend.
Yep, we're going to see a top 8 match between two players that have had no shortage of success at the international level. We got Paul Ruiz and Gabriel Agati. Both of them have had at least a top 4 at a IC before. Agati's the defending runner-up at any IC. And Paul, I know, got top 4 at LAIC 1 year, I believe. But obviously, Paul being a world champion and Gabriel being just a perennially great player. And 2 LATAM players in top 8 here at EUIC, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you could probably say that these are the 2 greatest LATAM players of all time.
Pretty safely.
Without too much pushback. If not 2 of the top 3, this is definitely the who's who of LATAM. And frankly, 2 of the best VGC players of all time. I think Paul definitely has an argument to be up there in the top 10 after his world champion and international top 4. And of course, Agati just seems to cut everything that he's at.
I don't know if he's ever failed a cut in his life.
I think maybe once.
He won a regional.
That might have just been a dream.
Yeah. I think he won the Brazil regional a month or 2 ago as well. So
okay. Yeah.
Already had success.
Having a good season, yep. And then Jake and I were just talking about this right before we went live, that Paul doesn't really seem to be consistently attending events, but whenever he does, he makes a deep breath.
Yeah, it's pretty much inevitable.
It is inevitable. So, of course, as I mentioned, we are in the midst of Regulation C. This is really the first format that we've gotten this year that's actually had a good run, where we get to watch a little bit of metagame development, which I think is really interesting to see. And Agati's team, which is going to come up on your screen in just a minute, is pretty perfectly representative of where the meta is right now. This is basically a meta-defining team at this point, well, at least kind of the core of it. Yeah. And then there are a couple of tweaks that he kind of made to adjust to the meta, most notably Baxcalibur, which handles kind of his kind of team very well.
Yeah, the Palafin, Arcanine, and Mungus cores become pretty standard. Well, let me finish. that core, it's a really solid Firewater Grass core. A lot of times you will see Tingle and Flutter out next to them. The Baxcalibur is cool. I really like the Clear Amulet Baxcalibur idea on this team because it is Howl Arcanine. And so alongside Palafin and Baxcalibur and Tinglu, you have 3 really good Howl partners. And the Clear Amulet means that you can't be intimidated through them. And so Clear Amulet Baxcalibur is kind of a really hard stop to Arcanine, which is always really nice. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a neat idea.
Yeah, I think these kind of teams are really interesting and tend to be kind of the true counter-meta teams, or at least anti-meta teams, even though it's using a lot of what's popular right now. It's the techs and the Pokemon choices that kind of set it apart, instead of trying to jam Rindoberry Gastrodon onto your team or try and answer the entire meta in one Pokemon. He has a couple of niche answers where he's got this substitute Palafin, which is basically a way to handle a Mungus and some of the things that Palafin's afraid of, be it Will-O-Wisp or any of those kinds of moves. So that's really interesting. And then flip over to Paul's side of the field, and you have what is a pretty excellent Series 2 team.
Yeah, it does look actually, it really could just be a Series 2 team. But I think it's neat. I like Mouse Ape a lot. I keep mentioning that at any given chance. So it's cool to see it make it this far. I think Mousehold Goldengo is also really strong, especially given a nasty plot bulkier set we see with balls, with leftovers and whatnot. So I think that's really cool. I do like the Roaring Moon with it. It's not set up Roaring Moon, it's just booster energy with Tailwind and Breaking Swipe alongside Acrobatics. And now Selfless Arcanine is interesting. I think it's kind of neat on a team like this where you have a couple of big setup options because you have room to fit Snarl pretty easily. You lose Will-O-Wisp, but I think if you're shuffling Intimidate well enough, that's not a huge deal. And also it's Encore Iron Bundle, so it kind of plays into the whole setup option as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really cool team. And I think we saw a couple things like it in Series 2, if not the exact team.
Right.
Because I know there were a handful of Goldengo Mousehold teams running around. But I'm trying to think of whether or not there was also an Annihilate somewhere on there. But anyway.
I think usually the thing that popped up a lot at OCIC was Mousehold with Goldengo, but there was no Annihilate for the most part.
There was a lot of Tusk and stuff that. So yeah, so that's a really cool team, and it's one of the few, I think the only team in top 8 that is not Dundozo or some sort of Paladin balance team. So we managed to pick out like one of the few non-mirror matchups that we had too. So, all right, I'm ready to get into it.
Yeah, let's do it. I think this is kind of a classic lead, like Muscle Goldengo, because it's pretty easy to start getting your nasty plots going.
Yeah, and there's not really a lot of there's rarely enough offense from 2 Pokemon to really bust through both Mousehold and Goldengo in one turn, such that you always kind of like get the nasty plot on turn 1 or 2, and then you like find your pressure on turn 3.
Yeah, especially a situation like this where you really can't Shadow Ball. Like, that's a really, really ballsy play, and something I think in one of our Future Sight matches
we did, Colin did.
That's just a really tough play to make, and so a scenario like this where the worst case scenario is taking the Moonblast and Wave Crash like just happened, the Goldengo is still in a pretty solid spot, because at this point it's a pretty easy like Follow Me plus Make It Rain.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty scary double up, because that's still a lot of damage that's being thrown at Goldengo,
right.
But with the Mousehold there, and Goldengo tend to be like a little bit bulkier when they're running Nasty Plot, I think at this point. You feel pretty confident about being able to get your Nasty Plot. But again, this is kind of the turn where when you get to Make It Rain for the first time, that you have to actually start putting down damage, or you can get really far behind.
Yeah. I don't know if the Terrestrialization was the play there with the Flutter Mane. It's like, in theory, all you got was chip damage on the Goldengo and then some extra damage on Mousehold, but I think either way, like the damage gain you got from the Terrestrialization there wasn't a huge deal.
Yeah, I wonder if... you can reasonably expect maybe a knockout onto some Goldengo spreads, because I feel like you wouldn't necessarily try to make that play unless there was like a huge...
Even with Friend Guard, though? I don't know if that ever like that.
I don't know. That's what I'm saying. Like, maybe with it's like a Terra Water, and then you just Moonblast it or something
if it's Terra Waters.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. But yeah, clearly the incorrect Terrestrialization, although sometimes Fluttermane just needs to drop down 2 Moonblasts and it's done its job. So clearly everything that's on the field for Paul right now is in KO range. And it's going to be like, he's going to be pretty hard pressed to get a second Make It Rain off.
Maybe. I think, because we're going to see the Water Terrestrialization here, I think this pretty much guarantees it along with Follow Me. The Arcanine doesn't have extreme speed. It's like Howl, Will-O-Wisp, Protect, Fire Blitz. And so you're going to guaranteed like redirect that at least. So I don't think you ever Jet Punch in this situation, because the Wave Crash here, even though Friend Guard is gone, since you resist it, you probably eat one. We are about to see, too, the Goldengo being faster than Palafin, which is kind of big. That is not something that I would ever expect to see, but kind of looking at Gabriel's team, like the Palafin necessarily has to be slower than Arcanine if you're going to go for, if you're going to go for, like, Howl combos. And I think a lot of times, like, the setup Nasty Plot, Valkyrie, or Goldengo go pretty fast as well. So I take back what I said about the Wave Crash not killing. Maybe the Friend Guard difference is what I made it clear.
Yeah, that could be. But yeah, the speeds being the big thing there, because if not for having a relatively slow Palafin, there would not have been a second Make It Rain.
Right.
And we would have still had Arcanine around. And Palafin chip actually is probably pretty relevant at this point, especially with Iron Bundle on the field, because that kind of like pushes it into freeze dry range depending on how they're both trained.
I think it's probably not like the most offensive bundle, I would imagine.
With Encore,
yeah. So I could see it surviving one.
Yeah.
Annihilate also not really in the greatest spot. Like, a lot of times you really need that Friend Guard to start getting like your bulk ups off, and obviously you can't like beat it up anymore for the Rage Fist stacks.
Yeah.
So like, you do have a like decent Drain Punch target in the Excalibur, but at the same time, like, you're probably taking like 90 from Wave Crash.
Yeah, you're taking a lot of damage from Wave Crashes, although you could potentially be outspeeding, so that you don't have to take it until you get to deal damage. But I think that last turn it was double priority into the Annihilate, and I feel like that is potentially a losing play for Agati if those attacks had gone off.
Yeah, because if you give it the 2 Rage Fist stacks, that's kind of a big...
and surely it takes... And then Excalibur eats these 2 attacks.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking that surely, like, given that this is an Annihilate that has some HP, right, to affect, that those 2 priority attacks are not knocking out an Annihilate from full health. So you're giving over potentially 2 Rage Fist stacks,
which could be
in exchange for not knocking out, and you're leaving Iron Brittle open.
Yeah.
So that could have potentially been a losing play, but I feel like Agati sort of got away with one from the double protect, and then ended up making like a better play the next turn.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's rough because at this point, if the Palafin took a freeze dry on that prior turn, like we might have seen a win from Paul here, especially because it just KO'd. I think what Paul was doing there when he doubled the backs is just kind of trying to call a Palafin protect.
Right.
Because we saw the Palafin being slower than Annihilate a couple times there. So like a Freeze Dry may not have picked it up, but Freeze Dry plus like Drain Punch or Rage Fist certainly would. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, Annihilate should be able to sustain through the Excalibur with Drain Punches, you might think. Mm-hmm. So kind of a risky play there. I think especially because the Excalibur wasn't knocking anything out in one shot.
That's what I was going to say, is that like that is kind of the reason that you don't need to double protect, because the worst case scenario is like a protecting Palafin and then you're rolling a critical hit onto your Iron Bundle, right, for the game, basically. Where the more likely scenario is that at some point you're going to be able to freeze dry it, and you don't need to protect to ensure that that happens.
Right.
Although, I guess, does a Glaive Rush plus a Jet Punch knock out Iron Bundle?
Well, that's what we saw, right?
Oh, right. Happened. So that's what would have happened, right? Is if there was a protect, it would have been freeze trying to protect Glaive Rush into Bundle, and then the Jet Punch would have knocked it out.
Yeah, so that's what he was
So
going
I guess
for
that's the end game. Okay.
Right.
I see.
It's just risky to leave the Palafin open, because I think you, like, damaging Palafin as it attacks is probably your only way to win that game.
Okay, so that's game one. It's pretty close. And we're going to get ready to go into game two here. So I think that... Okay. Well, I didn't...
Pause it.
What's that?
I'll stop it.
Okay, I was going to say, and I didn't get to, that I feel like both players are feeling pretty good about their leads at this point.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't see in the way that both of those two players played their early games that they seem to be at least comfortable with what it was, and there are a couple of different outcomes, but they're comfortable with where they started. Yeah,
I don't think there's any big issue with how the game started. Again, like, we say it as the same lead, but the worst case scenario here, assuming that Gabriel doesn't go for like a huge Shadow Ball read, is that Moonblast Wave Crash combo. Mm-hmm. And I guess going back to the Terrestrialization and the Flutter Mane, like maybe that was the difference between the Wave Crash KOing the like Terra Water Golden Go later on. It's like that chunk of damage could have been the difference. So
I hadn't thought of that.
Like, even if you're not taking a KO with it, like that extra bit of damage, especially with leftovers on Golden Go, could be pretty valuable later on. So retroactively kind of makes sense a little bit more. But at the same time, like, you still have a pretty much guaranteed nasty pop this turn should you want to go for it. And especially given that you know that the Golden goes faster than Palafin, it feels like a pretty safe like game plan to me.
Right. Yeah, I think really there's just a couple different ways that Paul can play it, and there's like a little bit of a mind game, right?
Right.
Where there's like a scenario where you trade Mousehold for a nasty plot.
Yeah.
There's a scenario like the first game where you just trade a lot of damage onto Golden Go for a nasty plot. You can switch out either of those slots. I think Golden Go stays, but you could potentially try and get something into the Mousehold slot.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of different ways that you could play turn one, but the end result is that Golden Go has a nasty plot, and we're going from there.
Yeah, pretty much.
So he's gonna blow Terra Fairy again, which we were kind of questioning in the first game, but when you brought up the difference in the damage roll, like that's potentially a reason.
Yeah.
And I think also we saw it drop Mousehold down to like 10 HP or something like that, so there's a potential that there's like a roll onto Mousehold there as well.
Yeah. I think if looking at the rest of Gabriel's team, I don't think that there's any other Terra that's like super necessary. So I guess it still makes sense in that regard too. Like the Palafin, obviously the Wave Crash just KO'd the Annihilate, so you don't need the Terrestrialization for that. And at the same time, like, I don't think there's anything on Paul's team that necessitates Terra Water damage. In the same way, like the Excalibur doesn't really have to fear anything as a Dragon Ice type, so you don't really need the poison on it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So just the last thing would leave like defensive Terra onto Arcanine, which it obviously doesn't really need to take on Golden Go either way. So turn one's basically a wash, and then we're going to go into turn two here, where Palafin is just going to basically get out for free, where it... Agati knows that it doesn't have to take damage at this point, so that he can bring it back at full HP when it's in its hero form. And then Mousehold basically trades like 3 out of 4 of the mice in exchange for a nasty plot on Golden Go. So now we're like in a very similar position to where we were, except Arcanine's already on the field and Mousehold has taken 1 billion damage.
Yeah, I like the switching out Flutter Mane a lot here too, especially because you're bringing in to like make it rain resist. I don't think we didn't see the Arcanine. Oh, we did. It was there for one. But either way, like the Golden Go goes down to +1 special attack this turn, at the cost of losing Mouse Hold as well, so beating Arcanine goes for Flare Blitz. But this actually a really cool howl here. I love this play.
Yeah. I think it's great because there's not really a whole lot else that Arcanine is doing right now. Like, you know that you're basically going to be 3-hit KO'd based on the damage that it did to Arcanine and to Palafin in the first game.
Yeah.
You're going to be 3-hit KO'd, potentially 4-hit KO'd after the drop, so there's no reason to not just basically set up Palafin for the rest of the game, especially because you know what's in the back, and you can potentially be pushing yourself into position for, like, being able to just knock out Bundle, or like, things like that. You're at +2 with Palafin, which is like just an insane thing to think about.
Yeah.
But instead, Agati gets like a little careless there, I think, and just kind of like lets Palafin drop.
I think he might have been thinking, Paul went for the Arcanine immediately last game, so that might be what's going to happen here now. I'm surprised there was no Jet Punch, I guess, with the Howl there.
Yeah.
Without the Jet Punch, that means that your Palafin has to attack twice, basically, before you can knock out the Golden Go. And since Golden goes faster, you're really not going to get that option. Like, if you Howl Jet Punch the Mouse Hold, then you can do something next turn.
Like Howl Wave Crash the next turn.
Yeah. But in this case, like, obviously he was going for either Wave Crash. I guess he could have been going for Sub there, too. But you're probably looking to Wave Crash the Golden Go, like, maybe trying to catch the Mouse Hold protecting or swapping or something.
Right.
Unfortunately, it just doesn't pay out. I think the speeds are interesting, because Arcanine is the fastest, and then Golden Go, and then Palafin. So clearly it's more than just, like, a 1, 2, 3, like your Arcanine is one faster than your Palafin.
Right.
It's probably just like very low speed Palafin fanned against.
And a lot of players when they train Pokemon, they don't like them to be the same speed, right? And
you never like speed type.
We're talking about how Baxcalibur is in the same realm as well, so it might be 1, 2, 3 just with the Baxcalibur, and like Golden Go happens to be sitting at the same speed.
Baxcalibur or something.
We've certainly seen that before. The end result being that Agati is denied a +2 Palafin, which obviously sad. We like +0 Palafin.
We do.
Being missing out on the +2 is even that much sadder.
At the same time, though, like, look at Fluttermane. Fluttermane's kind of like super well poised. As long as it doesn't take a Make It Rain, like the Bundle and the Annihilate are the two things in the back, and that's going to be really, really tough to deal with for Paul, even with the like Friend Guard and the Potion Go being at full, just because you don't have a Steel Resist anymore. In fact, half your Pokemon are weak to Fairy. Or sorry, you don't have the Fairy Resist. Half your Pokemon are weak to Fairy, and the Bundle just gets knocked out by Moonblast anyway. So you're gonna have to maneuver around this Fluttermane a lot harder now.
Yeah, and those positions where Specs Bundle can come in and click Dazzling Gleam are kind of the ones that you dream about.
Yeah.
Baxcalibur is actually going to take the field first, and like Protect Howl, I think, is pretty cool. And then I think the other thing that we're not really thinking or talking about is that like Arcanine's still a Pokemon with very high attack, and it has Flare Blitz, and it's at +3 right now.
Yeah.
So you can't ignore it. Like, obviously you're a little bit more afraid of Baxcalibur, you're way more afraid of Palafin when it has the attack boost, but this Flare Blitz is going to do a lot of damage to anything that it hits.
Yeah, even with the Friend Guard. Like in this case, you have like the Ice Shot option to poach the Friend Guard away, and then it could go for like a +3 Flare Blitz. Does it kind of sees through that, I guess. I don't know that the Protect on the Golden Go is the play there, because you're kind of giving up the option to do a lot of damage, unless you know that the Bax is faster than Golden Go. I don't know that we saw that interaction.
No, because there's been Protect and then Protect this turn. We definitely didn't see it game one, because I think Golden Go was knocked out by the time that
so I guess that's the risk. Like a Flare Blitz knocking out Mouse Hold and then Glaive Rush knocking out Bax is knocking out Golden Go is the issue there. And +1 Glaive Rush without Friend Guard on the water Golden Go probably just knocks it out. I have to imagine.
Right.
And you also can't Icy Wind it here. Like, they clear like coming in pretty heavy.
That's right. I was
just
going to say, wait, don't you just Icy Wind here? No, you can't. You can't because of the amulet, right? Okay, so we're still not going to get to see them interact. Baxcalibur is just going to protect itself, which obviously, like, I think makes sense, right? Because you want to get Fluttermane onto the field here as, like, the second offensive option. And then Arcanine is basically just going to get knocked out by... Wait. Did it move? Did it howl?
I got Icy Winded.
Oh, I got Icy Winded. Yeah. Okay. I know these things are all close in speed, and I'm like, wait a minute, has it been speed tying this entire time? Okay, it got Icy Winded.
But at the same time, like a -1 Flutter probably still outspeeds Golden Go.
Yeah.
And you do have Encore here, but Gabriel's going to kind of see through that and make a really big play. I love the AC Shard. The Ice Shard's going to come out here just because the Encore is like pretty obvious. It's kind of your one when conditioning for Paul is locking that into Protect, so it can't do any damage. and then one Make It Rain probably still clears the Flutter Main, and then you win. But Ice Shard coming out here, even though it's going to be resisted by everything, like a +1 Ice Shard into Golden Ghost still is a big chunk of damage there.
And we know how much Specs Flutter does. Like, we've seen that interact with Golden Go a couple times in the past, well, at least in some of the matches that we've been watching at the big tournaments lately, where when it drops its Steel type, it gets hit really hard by Flutter Main.
Yeah.
And I think we kind of think about like the Steel type, like you feel like it should do less damage, and it just doesn't. Especially with the Terra Fairy, it's got choice specs, it does 1 million damage, and it was probably the Ice Shard that put it into range there. So like, not only are you dodging the Encore, but it's like a meaningful amount of damage as far as like how much damage Flutter Main does to Golden Go.
At this point, it's kind of hopeless trying to KO this Flutter Main, because you either have to like Icy Wind Rage Fest it, which won't do any damage, or you have to like I guess you get 2 shots with Freeze Dry to freeze it. So like, you can protect Freeze Dry once if you want to, and then Freeze Dry the second turn, give yourself those 2 options. But even then, like, Annihilate is not boosted at all, Rage Fist is still just at 50, and there's no reason not to Moonblast that slot, like, at all.
Yeah, so the other alternative win con is basically like trying to catch Agati sleeping, which he rarely is.
Yeah, no, I don't think there's ever a reason to not Moonblast that. I think your one way to lose is Annihilate somehow starting to bulk up and get maybe a Rage Fist stack or 2, and then you lose, and then you're just not creating those turns. Like that Freeze Dry, you would have taken 4 to KO, I think, and so just a smart play there. Yeah,
so you're right. You would have had to find the freeze, and then also like get pretty lucky, and then it's not looking up for several turns, because Excalibur is not really doing a ton. Like Glaive Rush is not 1-hit KOing either Pokemon there.
I had +1? I don't know.
Oh, was it +1?
Yeah,
I was about that. Yeah, I was gonna say I know it needs a boosting item to knock out Iron Bundle.
Yeah.
But yeah, at +1 maybe that's scary. Dang,
yeah,
Howl is scary. I'm not looking forward to facing that stuff. I think it's a really cool attack.
I think that a lot of the reason Gabriel won the second game was because he was so aggressive with the Howls. Like we saw the 2 go into Palafin for no payoff, but the Howl that the Excalibur got was really big because it threatened that KO. And demanded a lot more attention than if it was just at like neutral. And even though I don't even think the Arcanine attacked anything when it got to +3, like it finished the mouse hold at 8 HP or whatever, but the Howls themselves, really just the last one paying off, even though he went for the 3, but that's kind of all you needed. Like the entire time the Palafin was a lot more threatening, so it was more difficult to ignore it even with your Water Golden Go than it would have been, and so it just creates more space, especially for the Spec Palafin.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. It's obviously played very well, and I think finding like unique ways to exert pressure with these kind of like defensive glue type Pokemon is really important, because you don't always want to just be like clicking Flare Blitz to do 5 damage to something the entire game. Like once everything's burned, there's no utility in Snarl, but like Howl, like assuming it's one of like 4 out of 6 Pokemon on his team that's next to it, or 2, and Tinglu. So like if it's any of 3 Pokemon sitting next to Arcanine, you can basically be exerting kind of like passive pressure, not passive, secondhand pressure. Is that secondhand pressure by howling? And obviously he plays it really, really well there, and sort of like forces you to like your opponent to think about what you're targeting, because you can't leave it there.
Right. I really like the switch in Howl plays too. They're like immediately like a big deal.
Yeah, and I even just like Protect Howl, I was like, that's right, you can do that.
Like, interestingly, you cannot sub-howl.
I know, I just saw that on Twitter. I would have expected that you would be able to. But there's always weird interactions with like side Pokemon. Like you can't Bulldoze competitive, like side Bulldoze competitive, and like there's weird interactions.
And there was the whole like weird stuff with Whirlpool and sub on stream in Fort Wayne. Like that was so that was really strange.
They're always just like bizarre interactions. Yeah. Anyway, that's that set. So this was our top 8 set, and Agati would go on to make finals before being knocked out by Paul. And what was also a really good set.
We thought about doing that one, but that was a long set with just like a lot of like balancing back and forth switches and position plays. And I love casting those because they're like really interesting in the moment, but it's less entertaining in like this scenario, I think.
It would have been really exciting to cast just Game 3, or to talk about just Game 3.
Yes, I would have loved that. Maybe we'll do a special episode.
That was fun. Okay, well, if we do a special episode, then I won't spoil it, but if you haven't seen that set for some reason and you're watching this video, like, I don't know why you wouldn't have seen that, but you are watching that. But if you are, go watch that set. I thought it was really good. And I guess I just won't give the spoilers. I would have tied it off. But yeah, so Agati was in finals of EUIC.
It went to game 3.
It went to game 3. It went to game 3. Yep. And I think now we're at the point in the season where we've got a little bit of a hiatus, if I'm not incorrect.
I think the next
between majors
is in like 2 weeks
or something like that.
Portland's the first week in
this is like the first 1 week gap we've had anyway.
Yeah.
But we do have locals coming back soon, which is exciting.
And we have the global challenges.
Okay, cool. Cool, that's the one. Yeah, so there's still a lot of Pokemon stuff going on, and then we're all kind of like on the path to NAIC at this point, which is really the next major and the last major before Worlds.
Yep.
So we'll be playing Series 3 up until that time, so we will have a lot more Series 3 videos, I'm sure. So is the next episode that we're doing before or after?
I think it'll be
after, right? Okay, so we'll either do something from this event, maybe we'll do finals. It's before?
Yeah, there's one more before Hartford, or Portland.
Okay, so we'll have another EUIC match for you in 2 weeks then, probably, before we get into some of the fresh content. Maybe we'll do finals, maybe we'll find something else. But yeah, this is a cool match. There's an insane CP race going on in North America right now, and it's funny that after so long without locals that this could very much come down to like who lives in Ohio. But yeah, so that's something to look forward to. It's a really exciting season. A lot of cool things are happening in all the major events. Like new players are winning regionals, old heads are winning regionals, like the best players of all time are making big runs. So it's a really exciting time to be following VGC. So we're happy that you're with us following along these videos. We think we've picked out some good matches, and of course we'll have another one coming in 2 weeks. Feel free to drop some correspondence in the comments of this video or on Twitter. And we look forward to hearing from you. But until then, we will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Future Sight.